We're live. Good afternoon, producer Susan. You all recovered from Memorial Day
I
celebration?
am Jersey Joe. How about you?
Uh, Doing great, thank you. Hey, a little note. Today is June 6th, and you know what June 6th is?
It's primary day in New Jersey.
You know what else it is? There's something that happened.
It's a remembrance day of all of the wars in Europe.
D-Day. This is the day
Yeah, D-Day. Sorry,
D-Day
thank you.
that
The word the
that the
letter escapes me.
Allies landed on the beaches of Normandy.
Normandy.
And just so we don't forget, do you know how many American soldiers lost their lives on this day in 1942?
Uh,
Actually,
uh
1945, rather.
a lot. I don't know the number offhand.
10,000 American soldiers died on this day in 1945, but it was the beginning of the end of the war. So didn't want
And
anybody to forget
I
that.
and I believe that your father fought in that war.
My father was a World War II veteran. He wasn't in Normandy, but he was in World War II. All right. So anyway, it's the situation with Jersey Joe, news and perspective. You won't hear on TV. Our quote of the week, we're going to start off with a 150-year-old quote by Abraham Lincoln that was recently used in a debate regarding whether or not a transgender person really becomes someone of the opposite sex. And who would have guessed that a quote by Abraham Lincoln would be used in a debate regarding transgenderism today? The stupidest and scariest thing I've heard all week, and I think you've seen this. A man asks a bunch of young adults a series of very simple questions, and I'll go through some of those questions. And it's astounding how many people didn't know the answer to these incredibly simple questions. And I'll even play. It's a 5-minute clip. I'll play like 90 seconds of it just to give you an idea. But it's really it bothersome to me that so many young people, and the vast majority of them are either currently of voting age or soon will be, that these are the people who, by and large, will determine who our next president is, and they can't tell you how many eggs there are in a dozen eggs. I mean, literally,
Mhm.
can't tell you how many eggs there are in a dozen eggs, and these people vote.
I believe
Um,
I sent that to you, and yeah, I have the same thought. I can't believe these people vote or soon
yeah,
will be voting.
right. Um, with on our tax dollars at work segment, I'll tell you about uh, how federal grants are given to school districts to buy electric buses are turning into a huge waste of your tax dollars. We'll bring an update on Biden's declared war on fossil fuels and how one of his recent executive orders is going to severely hurt members of the Navajo Nation in New Mexico. We'll tell you about a recent Supreme Court ruling that stops the EPA from trying to regulate what farmers can and cannot do with their own land. We'll share with you some data on how effective Mexico's strict gun laws are at stopping gun violence in that country. And our taxpayer relief shot is from Huntsville, where a store employee shoots and kills a man who attacks him. But before that, I just heard one thing just before I came on. A woman was hired by a health club in New York City, um, she was late to work 47 times in her first 10 months. And the company and the health club fired her for being late 47 times in 10 months. Now, she was a Black woman and she was also transgender. She sued, claiming that her termination was racially biased, even though the same guy that hired her is the same guy that fired her. Jury awarded her $11 million.
What for what grounds?
Well, she convinced the jury that her firing was not because she was late 47 times in 10 months. It's because she was a transgender Black woman, and she was fired not because she was late 47 times in 10 months, but because she was a Black. It was retaliation for her being a Black transgender woman, or she's a biological woman, transgender, whatever. It makes you shake your head at juries. All right. But let's move on because I got so much stuff. I'm never going to get to it all. My question is, how much am I going to have to leave out? Anyway, here's the quote of the week. So Thomas Sowell, who we've talked about before, he's a economist and author. He's a Black man, and they were having this debate about transgenderism, and he related this story, and I did research this. This is an actual quote by Abraham Lincoln. You can look it up. And here's what Thomas Sowell remarked on this debate about transgenderism. He said, Abraham Lincoln once asked an audience how many legs a dog has if you count the tail as a leg. When the audience answered 5, Lincoln told them that the answer was 4. The fact that you called the tail a leg did not make it a leg. And can you see the relevance to this debate? Now, don't worry, if a person wants to say, I prefer to go through life as a man, or I prefer to go through life as a woman, I am absolutely fine with that. But please don't ask me to believe that you're a man when you're not. So what's and if you don't want to commit, that's fine. But I think the Lincoln quote is very apropos to this whole thing about transgenderism and saying, I demand you recognize me as a sex other than I was born. So, and any thoughts on your part, or you just want to leave it alone?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the stupidest and scariest thing I've heard all week. This is the 5-minute video where a man asked teenagers just one or two of the following very simple questions, and that none of them can answer. And here's the questions. I'm going to read you all the questions I heard. I jot them down. Then I'll play 60 seconds. So he's got this big picture of a clock, and on the clock is showing 5 minutes to 2. And he holds up this picture of a clock, and he asks the people, what time is the clock showing? Now, again, everybody has digital watches these days. These people look at the clock showing 5 minutes to 2. Nobody can tell them what time it is. He asked people how many states are in the United States. No, nobody can tell them. What's the capital of the United States? Some of them say, the United States has a capital? He asked them what 2 countries border the United States, which is obviously Canada and Mexico. He asked them what continent are we on right now? What language is spoken in Idaho? How many eggs in a dozen? How many months in a year? What is the 3rd month of the year? How many cents in a dollar? How many dimes in a dollar? How many letters in the alphabet? How many moons does the Earth have? How much is 3 times 3 times 3? Can you name 3 countries other than the United States? Can you name a country that starts with the letter U, which is the United States, or Uganda? What country is Hawaii part of? Now, by the way, were there any questions in that list that you couldn't have answered?
This is all 3rd grade. You remember that old game show, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader? This is all
Right.
smarter than a 3rd grader.
Smarter. Anyway, so let me just play you 60 seconds of this clip. And starting with, he's asking this girl who appears to be about 19 or 20, how many eggs in a dozen?
Like how many eggs are in 1 dozen? Yes. Know what the 3rd month of each year is?
February.
Yes. Do you know what 2 countries border the U.S.?
All countries border the US.
Border.
Canada,
Yeah, and what?
Russia,
Yes. How many moons does the Earth have?
6.
Yes. How many states make up the United States?
6.
And by the way, this guy's wearing a college graduation. This guy's just graduated from college. He's wearing his college graduation robe. Here we go. And so how many, here we go. Let me back up.
Yes. How many states make up the United States?
6.
Yes. How many letters are in the alphabet? 24? You know how many seasons there are?
12. I don't know. 12.
Yes. What language do the people in Idaho speak?
Potato.
Wait, what? What language?
I don't know. The first thing that came to mind was potatoes.
How many states make up the United States? Guess a number. 5. Yes. What continent are we on right now?
What continent? I think like North Africa.
It's 3 times 3 times 3.
18.
Yes. How many cents are in $1?
How many cents are $1?
Yeah.
1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, 6.
Yes. You know what country we gained our independence from?
Mexico, right? No, that's so wrong. Russia, no.
Give me a final guess.
Canada.
What a sad state of affair.
I'll
And
post the entire video on the website.
if you would, please. I mean, that's just so embarrassing. That and these are the people that they're being graduated from high school, and that kind of, it wasn't in my notes, but I was reading a report like in Chicago, only 20% of the high school graduates can read or do math at grade level. Remember, well, you probably don't, but when I went to school, they used to leave you back and make you repeat grades. Now they are so focused on getting them in and out of the school, they just push them through. The fact that
Mhm.
they are failing and can't read at grade level and can't do math at grade level, it doesn't matter. They just promote them up and out. Um, and think about the workforce. And if one of the questions was, how much is a quarter plus 2 dimes? And they couldn't even answer the question. I mean, obviously, the answer is 45 cents, 25 plus 10 plus 10. What does it say about the quality of the workforce the United States has,
Right.
currently has and will have, because we're graduating people from high school that can't make change, can't tell you what 3 times 3 times 3 is. It's really scary in terms of what the future of this country is in terms of a educated workforce. And people wonder why jobs are moving overseas. Um, anyway, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's just scary in
No,
terms.
I agree. It's sad. And the commentator, by the way, who's asking the questions, when you hear him say yes, if you watch the video, he's just doing it out of appeasement, because he
Yes.
has no,
Yeah, he doesn't
for
want
lack
to
of a better
argue.
word, he just agrees with them.
He just shakes his head and say yes. Like, obviously, that's the most ridiculous answer I've ever heard, but he just tells the person, yes, you're right, and he moves on. So, all right. So remember this. I'm going to tie this back to the debt ceiling negotiations from last week, where the federal government kept saying we're already bare bones. We have nothing we can cut. Well, remember I talked about the one grant where the Department of Homeland Security gave some little college in Dayton, Ohio, $350,000 to come up with a pyramid of right wing. What was it? Right wing. By getting people right wing extremism, and they lumped in Fox News and the Republican National Committee with the American Nazi Party. So obviously that's $350,000 we didn't have to spend. Now it turns out the federal government has been taking money we don't have. When I say money we don't have, because this year we're going to have to borrow 1.6 trillion, which, as I pointed out 2 weeks ago, means we have to borrow $50,000 every second to cover that 1.6 trillion. Turns out the federal government has been giving school districts grants to go buy electric school buses. Now, is that something the federal government needs to do? I mean, if a school district wants electric school buses, why don't they go to the taxpayers of the school district and say, hey, we're going to raise your property taxes by a couple of bucks because we want to buy electric school buses? Don't you think that's the way it should work?
No, because that's not efficient use of their tax money.
Well, they would probably say, no, we don't want to spend our tax dollars. But so the federal government
I
is saying
think that
that's
school buses are a necessity, but not electric school buses.
right. So the federal government is saying, hey, we're going to borrow money and we're going to give it to school districts who didn't think it was important enough to go buy them on their own. And we're going to give this money, and you can only use this money for electric school buses. So, and here's what's happened as a result of that. I'm going to read you a little quote here from a story. During an April 19th presentation to the Ann Arbor Public School Board of Education, the district's environmental sustainability director, and I won't tell you his name highlighted a number of issues with the district's electric bus fleet. Those buses, Lazuna said, have a lot of downtime and performance issues and aren't fully on the road, despite the fact that they're approximately 5 times more expensive than regular buses. The infrastructure upgrades required to use the buses, meanwhile, were originally estimated to only be about $50,000. But, and here's a quote, ended up being more like $200,000, according to Lazuna. I have a number of colleagues in different states who are facing similar challenges, the district official lamented. So let me go back and recap that. So the buses cost 5 times more than a regular bus, are less reliable. They can't keep them on the road, and they had to spend $200,000 to put in these charging stations to keep these buses charged, to recharge them, because you can't charge them with a regular Tesla charger. And then I've got the art in the article I have, which you might want to post. There are many other school districts have similar horror stories. So again, in terms of things that we don't need to be funding, the federal government doesn't need to be giving away taxpayer dollars to school districts to buy electric school buses that they really, at this point, don't even want and really aren't working. Any thoughts on the use of tax dollars to buy school buses, electric school buses?
Agreed. I think that school buses are a necessity for some districts, and they should not be spending their money on electric school buses.
And remember, at 5-1, they could have bought 5 times as many regular buses for every one electric bus. And wouldn't that have been a far better use of tax dollars to buy 5 times as many new buses as opposed to one electric bus? Anyway,
Absolutely.
Navajo Nation, I don't know if you're familiar with the Navajo Nation. It tends to be down around Farmington, New Mexico. That's where the Navajo Nation is.
Yep.
And unfortunately, like many Indian reservations that don't have casinos, up in South Dakota, and the Navajo Nation, the Indian reservations tend to be a lot of poverty. Don't know if you're familiar with the poverty that's associated with a lot of Indian reservations.
Yes.
Well, and the Navajo Nation is one. Again, they don't have any casinos down there. But the one thing they have going for them in that area of New Mexico, there is a lot of oil and gas. And they were looking for, and there's already been some oil and gas development near the Navajo Nation. And the oil and gas companies were getting closer and closer. And every time they come, there's a lot of employment. I happen to be involved in the oil and gas industry. You get these guys are working on a drilling rig. These guys are making, typical guy working on a drilling rig. He's making $100,000 a year. High school education, he's making $100,000 a year. And when these oil and gas companies start drilling and they're employing, and your typical oil well over the course of the 6 weeks, it tends to get up. It costs $5 million to drill an oil or gas well. Well, guess what? The bulk of that money gets pumped back into the local economy because these people have to eat, they have to sleep, they go to restaurants, they're buying clothes, and it creates employment, truck drivers, roughnecks. So the Navajo Nation was really looking forward to having this expansion of oil and drilling get more prevalent in and around the Navajo Nation. Well, President Biden, he said, I'm thinking about doing a 20-year ban on oil drilling on lands near the Navajo Nation. And he went out for public comment. And in 2021, Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez and Vice President Myron Leisner penned a letter to President Biden warning it would have a devastating impact on tribal members. And last year, the San Juan County, New Mexico Board of Commissioners passed a resolution opposing the Department of Energy administration proposal to ban drilling. Didn't make a single bit of difference. Biden has issued an executive order banning drilling for the next 20 years in and around the Navajo Nation, even though they said, we want you to drill. It's vital to our economy. It provides jobs. It provides money for our local economy. Biden said, nope, no more drilling in and around the Navajo Nation. So he's basically condemning them to continue to live in poverty. And any thoughts on the wisdom of doing that?
Yeah, obviously the Indian nations, including the Navajo nations, have a long history of Americans screwing them over.
Right.
And it's just another example.
Just another example. They've got, they're literally sitting on, millions, tens of millions of dollars of natural resources in terms of natural gas and oil. It's under their feet. And Biden says, nope, you can't drill for it. I'm not going to let it happen. Again, so, you've seen what a casino can do for an Indian nation, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you can drill
It's
for oil
job
and gas,
creation and
job creation and money into the economy, if no, Biden says, no, you can stay in poverty. We're not going to let people drill for oil and gas on your lands. Anyway, interesting Supreme Court ruling. The EPA, there's been a case going through the court system for the past 4 years. There was a farmer who had on his farmland a seasonal wetland. In other words, during a rainy season, there was a low spot in his field that would kind of get, it would have some standing water. And my grandparents had a farm. And, in the spring and when the snow melt, where there was a dip in the field, you would get a little pond, maybe 3 or 4 inches deep. And that's, when it was, because the ground becomes saturated. And, probably from March through the 1st of May, that little, that little area, maybe an acre, 2 acres, would have 2 or 3 inches of water in it, standing water, not connected to any river or stream. Anyway, the EPA was trying to tell a farmer he couldn't build on that piece of land. He couldn't irrigate it. He couldn't flatten it out. He couldn't excavate it, because it was a wetland, and we have authority over what happens to wetlands. And the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, called that seasonal wetland. They said that's under our jurisdiction. Well, last week the Supreme Court said no, you do not have jurisdiction. They said if that wetland had any regular connection to a body of water, either a larger year-round lake or a stream or a creek, yeah, you could argue that your charter to protect the waters of the United States might apply, because whatever would happen in that seasonal wetland could run into that creek, pond, or year-round lake. But this little depression in this farmer's field is not connected to any other body of water at any time during the year. So no, EPA, you do not have authority over a swampy area on a farmer's farm. I think that's a huge win for landowners and farmers. I don't know, any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you probably wouldn't want to build there anyway, knowing that it does, get soppy 2 months out of the year, but as a farmer, you probably have other uses for it.
Yeah, you can grow stuff in it. And by the way, I think what he wanted to do is actually he wanted to excavate and level it out and fill it in. And they said, no, you can't fill it in. It's a wetland. So he literally wanted to fill it in so it wouldn't get wet. And they prevented him from filling it in. All right. Let's move on to gun laws. There's a new show on called Catching Contraband or something. It's a documentary. Have you seen it?
I haven't. What channel is it on?
I don't know offhand. But I think if I can find it, I'll text it to you, or just Google contraband on your, it's a weekly series now. Anyway, I was watching it the other day, and one of the things I didn't realize, they're showing they're catching, now people think the Border Patrol is mostly they're catching drugs coming.
National Geographic.
National Geographic Channel? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, most people think of smuggling is drugs and illegal aliens coming from Mexico into the United States.
Mhm.
Turns out every day they're catching people smuggling pistols, rifles, and shotguns into Mexico. And then I was watching this, and then I was reading this NPR story on this. You know what and this, excluding what they catch, you know what Customs and Border Patrol now puts the annual figure at how many guns per year are being successfully smuggled into Mexico?
What's that?
250,000 guns per year. But when they stop these cars, like they'll stop a van and they'll go under where the spare tire should be. It's not just one gun. I mean, they're catching guys with 12, 14, 20 guns in the car. One guy had like 11 pistols, 4 AK-47s, 3 AR-15s, 2 shotguns. And think back, and you know why these people are doing this?
Money, drugs.
Right, Prohibition. Did Prohibition stop drinking in the United States?
Absolutely not.
What did Prohibition do?
It forced it underground.
Forced it underground, and it turned it into a criminal enterprise.
And unregulated.
Unregulated criminal enterprise. It made millionaires out of people like Al Capone. And of course, you had people, remember the Valentine's Day Massacre?
Mm-hmm.
You had thousands of people being killed in gang wars, over the rights to, smuggling liquor. So Prohibition didn't stop liquor. And Mexico, by the way, has incredibly strict gun laws. I'll just read them off to you. In Mexico, citizens are limited to just one handgun of a caliber no larger than 9mm or 38 special, can only have a maximum of 9 long guns, generally either a 22 caliber rifle or shotgun. You can't have a 30-30, you can't have a 30-06. And buying or owning a semi-automatic or bolt-action rifle of a larger caliber such as an AR-15, require special permission that is rarely given. So these guns that are being smuggled into Mexico, you can't legally buy them in Mexico, and you can't even legally own them in Mexico. So they basically created a lucrative supply and demand scenario very similar to prohibition in the United States, where it is now big business, because if you can make, let's say you can make $100 a gun for every gun you smuggle into Mexico. Well, 250,000 guns a year times $100 a gun, that's $25 million. That's a pretty good financial incentive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right. How are we doing on time?
Let's see. You got about a good 10 minutes.
All right. Well, guess what? Did I make it through everything I had today?
That would be a first.
That would be a first. Okay, we're going to go our taxpayer relief shot, and the reason I call them a taxpayer relief shot is that when you arrest a thug and you send them, first of all, the trial, they never have money, so you have to give them a court-appointed attorney, which costs money. And then if he gets convicted, you send him to prison. Well, prison is $75,000 or $80,000 a year to keep a guy in jail, and then if he gets out, you get probationary expense. So it costs the taxpayers to send a guy to try a guy for a crime and send him to jail for 10 years, cost the taxpayers $1 million. So we call them taxpayer relief shots because when the good guy or good woman with the gun shoots and kills the thug, you save the taxpayers, $1 million on average. And here's what the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida says about it. Here we go.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
Now that's the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, but we also have one that's got a couple of messages for criminals, and this is Polk County, Florida. Here we go.
I would highly suggest that if a looter breaks into your home, comes into your home while you're there to steal stuff, that you take your gun and you shoot him. You shoot him so that he looks like grated cheese.
And I've got just one more for you, and there's the Sheriff Grady Judge again. Here we go.
But we have received information in social media that some of the criminals were going to take their criminal conduct into the neighborhoods. I would tell them, if you value your life, you probably shouldn't do that in Polk County, because the people of Polk County like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns, and they're going to be in their homes tonight with their guns loaded. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, to set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns.
It's sad that you can't get any other sheriff in the entire United States to come out and say something like that.
But you got 2 in Florida.
You got 2 in Florida. All right, so let's go to Houston right now. And here we go. This is from Houston, where a store clerk just mind his own business. Here we go.
Police are still investigating a deadly shooting that happened inside of a business in Huntsville.
It was a store employee who police say shot and killed a man who attacked the worker. The owner of the shop says the gun was fired in self-defense.
News 3's Morgan Rydell has more.
Monday night, Huntsville police say a man entered Mr. Nice Guys on Highway 30 and attacked the store employee who was carrying a gun. Business owner Michael Martinez says his employee warned the man, who continued fighting the worker.
My employee was doing what he normally does, talking about different products in the store, asking the guy what the guy wanted. They had communication back and forth for about 2 minutes. And then the guy got physically angry. He started to attempt to get between the cabinet here. Employee stepping away, started pointing, telling me to get out of the store.
This is when Martinez says the employee used his weapon and shot the man multiple times. Police said the man died at the hospital, and they have not released his identity. Mr. Nice Guys is a wellness shop selling CBD products and smoking accessories. Martinez says nothing like this has ever happened here, and the employee is pretty shaken up.
And we don't deal with a lot of issues like that. It's an isolated incident, in our opinion. We've been open for almost 4 years with our stores, and this is the first time this has ever happened to an extreme like this. a little upsetting. You know, you never want to go to the extent of having somebody take a life. My guy, he's a little upset from last night today, but it's expected to be considered the circumstances.
That employee was not arrested, and Martinez says they don't expect the employee to face any charges. In Huntsville, Morgan Rydell, News 3.
You know what I found interesting about that? What I found interesting about that is that the owner of the store knew his employee was carrying a concealed weapon and was fine with it. How many businesses to this day, you know, do you think permit employees to carry a gun at work?
Definitely none around here. I know I've heard of a few in Colorado, not even in like Denver area, but you know, farther out in the more rural areas, I know it's accepted.
In fact, Lauren Boebert, the congressional representative from Colorado, she and her husband ran a grill called Shooters, or
Yeah, that's it. That was actually the place I was thinking of when I said that.
Shooters Grill in Rifle, Colorado.
Yeah.
And you'll see some owners, and we played some of these shots where the owner of the place, where the owner of the restaurant, the owner of the store carries a gun, but it's rare that you have an owner comfortable letting an employee carry a gun. And I have to say, you know, if a person is trained, licensed, it's a shame that more business owners aren't comfortable letting trained and licensed employees, you know, carry a concealed weapon at work, you know, given how prevalent, you know, as we both know, these things happen. I mean, when I pick one out for the week, I'm picking from a dozen. And by the way, for every one that's fatal, there's another, for every one fatal incident, there's another 3 or 4 not where the good guy with the gun shoots the bad guy, but it's not fatal, so we don't call it a taxpayer relief shot. But I can come up with 30 times a week where a good guy or a good woman with a gun shoots a bad guy. Now, only a third of those are fatal, but that's how prevalent, you know, it is. You know, the world's a dangerous place. So other than that, unless you've got something to add, I think
well, I got 2 questions for you. One,
Okay.
today is the primary day in New Jersey, and I know we've talked a lot the last few weeks about how these primaries are not glamorous elections, but they're the important elections because it's your judges and your district attorney. So are there any election races that are happening in New Jersey that stand out to you?
Not, you know, I only got the ballot for my voting district, and guess what? When I looked, I only had one Republican candidate for every office. So it wasn't, I had nothing to vote for because there was nobody to choose from. For every open position, there was only one Republican candidate. So it was pointless for me to vote in our primary today. Now, that's not true in every voting district in New Jersey, but it was really pointless for me to even vote in the primary because there was only one person to vote for, and even that person just got one vote. They were going to be the nominee. So.
And my second question is, so I understand tomorrow is actually another holiday.
Another holiday?
Another significant day on the calendar.
Somebody told me it might be my birthday tomorrow.
Well, Jerzee Joe, we do wish you a happy birthday tomorrow.
All right. Well, thank you, producer Susan. Anyway, I want to thank all of you who listened to the podcast for giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about the things I find of interest and importance. I hope you found those topics as interesting and important as I did. And if so, I hope you continue to listen to the podcast in the weeks and months to come. If you want to see some of the materials and story links you heard me talk about today, you can find them on the Jerzee Joe website. And again, that's Jerzee, spelled with a R, J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, E-E, JerzeeJoe.com. Producer Susan will get some of those links up, including the link with all the stupid young adults. If you want to email me with a comment, question, or suggested show topic, you can do that by sending me an email to joe@JerzeeJoe.com. And remember, Jerzee, JerzeeJoe.com. And with that, I'm over and out. Producer Susan, unless you've got something.
Nope. I hope you have a good birthday.
All right. Talk to you next week, producer Susan.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.